Here's the brutal truth you've been avoiding, the truth that hurts for a moment but frees you for life. An avoidant doesn't stay because you love them more. They don't stay because you're kind, loyal, patient, or endlessly understanding. They stay as long as their ego believes one thing: no matter what I do, you will never actually leave. Their comfort is not built on the quality of the connection. It's built on the security of your availability. And that changes everything about how they show up with you. When someone's ego is convinced that you will always be there, they don't feel urgency, they don't feel fear, they don't feel the need to fight for you. They feel safe enough to be lazy with you, to be inconsistent, to disappear and reappear when it suits them. Because deep down their inner story is simple. I can take my time. I can take them for granted. I can push them away and they'll still be waiting. Think about how many times you've proved this story true for them. They pulled back and you chased. They were cold and you wrote paragraphs. They cancelled on you and you forgave instantly. They disappeared and then came back with a casual "hey" and you responded like nothing happened. Each one of those moments didn't just show them that you care. It showed their ego that you are emotionally glued to them. It told them, I can behave badly and you will still fight for me. And while your heart thought you were saving the relationship, their ego thought, I can keep doing this. You weren't just loving them, you were training them to believe that your love is unconditional, even in the absence of basic respect, consistency, and effort. So why would their ego feel any urgency to change when your behavior keeps telling them you won't leave? Avoidant people are not unfeeling robots. They do get attached. They do feel something for you, but their ego is louder than their heart. Their ego is scared of losing freedom, scared of needing someone, scared of being vulnerable, so it builds a safety net. And you have been that safety net. You became the person they can come back to when they are lonely, when they're bored, when their other distractions fall flat. And because you care so deeply, you accept that role without realizing what it costs you. You end up living in this painful in-between space where you're never fully chosen, never fully prioritized, but also never fully let go. And their ego loves that. It gets the benefit of connection without the responsibility of commitment. This is why it feels like nothing you do is ever enough. You give more, and they don't suddenly become secure. You explain more, and they don't suddenly get it. You hold on tighter, and they don't suddenly show up better. Because the problem was never the depth of your love. The problem is the story. The ego is running in the background. You won't leave. As long as that script is alive, your extra effort doesn't inspire them. It relaxes them. It tells them they can keep sitting in their comfort zone while you do all the emotional labor. It tells them they can keep minimizing your need because you'll eventually calm down, forgive, and stay. And that's exactly what keeps you stuck in this cycle where you keep increasing the volume of your love while their effort stays on mute. You may even notice how sometimes the moment you try to pull back, they suddenly become a little more responsive, a little more interested, a little more attentive, and you think, finally, they're changing. But the second they feel your full presence, again, they slide right back into old habits. That's not love waking up, that's ego maintenance. The ego gets triggered by the possibility that you might detach, so it does just enough to pull you back, not enough to actually transform the relationship. And every time you accept that tiny spike of attention as proof of real change, you reinforce the exact belief that is hurting you. You can do the bare minimum and still keep me. The cruel part is that this dynamic slowly erodes your self-worth. You start believing that if you could just be more patient, more understanding, less needy, less emotional, they would finally feel safe enough to choose you the way you choose them. You twist yourself into shapes, downgrade your needs, suppress your boundaries, all so you don't scare them away. But what you don't see is that every time you betray yourself to keep them comfortable, their ego grows stronger and your sense of self gets weaker. And in that imbalance, real intimacy can't exist, because intimacy requires two people showing up fully, not one person shrinking while the other hides. The brutal truth is this: as long as their ego believes you won't leave, they don't have to confront their fears, they don't have to examine their patterns, they don't have to risk vulnerability, because in their mind, you are a fixed thing, a guarantee, and people don't respect guarantees the same way they respect possibilities they could actually lose. Your love became a permanent background music in their life, always playing, always there. And when something is always there, the ego stops leaning in to cherish it. It simply uses it. And you deserve so much more than being background music in someone's life, especially when you have been showing up as a whole symphony for them. What shakes this entire system is not more loving, it's not more explaining, it's not more waiting, it's the quiet, grounded decision that you will no longer participate in a dynamic where your presence is guaranteed while their effort is optional. When you stop confirming their story with your actions, When you stop proving I'll never leave no matter what you do, everything in the dynamic starts to shift, not because you wanted to play a game, but because you finally chose to stop playing against yourself. There is a very specific moment that changes everything with an avoidant, and it's not when you cry, it's not when you beg, and it's not when you finally say the perfect sentence. It's the quiet moment inside you when something clicks and you decide, I am done applying for this position in your life. No drama, no speech, no performance. Just an internal shift where you stop chasing, stop over-explaining, and stop trying to prove your worth to someone who keeps acting like it's optional to value you. That moment is the real ego wound, because up until then their entire illusion has been built on one belief. You need me more than I need you. When you withdraw from that game, very calmly, their illusion begins to crack. You have to understand how much power you give away when you chase. Every time you double text, every time you reopen a conversation they let die, every time you explain the same thing in 5 different ways just to make sure they get it. You are unconsciously auditioning. You're saying, please pick me, please understand me, please choose me. And while your heart is trying to create connection, their ego is collecting evidence that you are willing to fight for them while they barely show up for you, evidence that they can delay, ignore, dismiss, and you'll still be there the moment you stop doing that. The moment you stop feeding them that constant proof, their mind loses its favorite shield, the shield of certainty that you will always be available no matter how they behave. When you stop chasing, you're not suddenly cold or rude, you're just no longer in pursuit. You answer when it feels right, but you don't stretch yourself to accommodate their inconsistency. You don't wreck your own plans to match their last-minute whims. You don't go out of your way to fix the emotional mess they created. You give the responsibility of effort back to its rightful owner, and this is where the ego starts to feel exposed, because it is used to you doing all the emotional heavy lifting, used to you repairing every rupture, used to you stretching yourself to keep the bond intact. When you don't rush in to fix things, they are left alone with the consequences of their own distance, and that is uncomfortable for their ego. When you stop over-explaining, you remove another layer of protection from around their ego, because over-explaining is often you trying to control their perception, trying to make them see your heart so clearly that they won't misinterpret you. But an avoidant ego uses that against you. It hears your explanations as reassurance. They care this much, they're this invested, I can relax when you simply state your need once, clearly and calmly, and then let your actions align with it. You are no longer trying to bend reality in their favor. You're letting reality speak for itself, and the reality is this: if they don't step up, they lose access to you. That truth, even if unspoken, pierces their illusion that you will always be waiting on the other side of their avoidance. The line, I'm not applying for this position anymore, is not something you necessarily say out loud to them. It's a declaration you make to yourself. You stop seeing yourself as a candidate hoping to be chosen and start seeing yourself as the interviewer, observing whether they are qualified to hold space in your life. That shift flips the entire dynamic internally before anything changes externally. Suddenly you're not asking, how can I make them stay? You're asking, are they actually capable of giving me what I want? And when your focus changes, so does your energy. You become less frantic, less clingy, less willing to negotiate your standards. And that stability is exactly what their ego cannot easily manipulate. From their perspective, this change is subtle but deeply unsettling. They send a lazy hey, and instead of a long, excited response, they get something short and grounded, or sometimes no response at all. They disappear for days and come back, expecting the old version of you waiting with open arms. But they meet someone who is polite, distant, or simply busy with their own life. They test your old triggers, and the old buttons no longer work, and that's when their ego starts to panic, because it realizes it no longer has guaranteed access to your emotional world. The supply of validation, reassurance, and unconditional availability that it used to feed on is suddenly limited. That's the crack in the illusion. The ego feels a loss of control, and with avoidance, control is safety. As that illusion breaks, something new has a chance to emerge. Sometimes that's genuine effort. Sometimes it's genuine self-reflection. Sometimes it's the beginning of real change, because for the first time they are confronted with a version of you who is not begging, not chasing, not trying to sell yourself, but simply standing in your worth. And whether they rise to meet that or not, the power has already shifted. Because the real secret was never how to convince them to love you. It was learning how to stop applying for love in places that require you to abandon yourself. There is a massive difference between pulling back and playing games. And this is where most people either lose their power or accidentally become toxic. When I say pull back, I'm not talking about disappearing to punish them, posting things to make them jealous, or acting cold while you're secretly obsessing over them. That's still you being emotional, tied to their every move, still you making them the center of your universe, just in a different costume. The kind of pullback that actually changes the dynamic is quiet, clean, and rooted in self-respect. You are not trying to get a reaction. You are trying to get your life back. You stop chasing, yes, but you also stop revolving your energy around what they do or don't do. Instead of sitting by your phone measuring your worth by the gaps between their messages, you begin to fill those gaps with your own priorities, your own routines, your own growth, and that internal shift is what they feel, even if you never announce it. When you stop playing games, you stop with the, "I'll wait exactly 3 hours to reply," or "let me post this picture just to make them jealous," because that kind of strategy still makes them your emotional son. Everything you do is still a reaction to them. Even if it looks like distance on the surface, the right kind of pullback is honest. You reply when you actually have the time and emotional capacity, not to create artificial scarcity, but because your life is no longer on standby for them. You say less, not because you're withholding to manipulate, but because you no longer feel the urge to overshare with someone who consistently does the bare minimum. You don't agree to last-minute plans that disrespect your schedule just so you can feel close to them for a few hours. You let no be a complete sentence when something doesn't align with your standards. And you do all of this with a calm, grounded energy, not anger, not revenge, just clarity. The powerful thing about this is that your new standards start speaking louder than your words ever did before. You might have told them, "I need consistency," but still replied instantly whenever they came back, so their ego learned, "I can ignore what they say, I just have to watch what they do." Now your actions match your words. You say you won't tolerate breadcrumbing, and you don't. You say you're not okay with disappearing acts, and you don't. To reward them when they return. You say you want someone who shows up, and you stop pouring all of your effort into someone who doesn't. For an avoidant, this is jarring, because they're used to people threatening change but staying exactly the same. They know how to navigate tears, arguments, and emotional lectures, but they don't know what to do with quiet, consistent boundaries. It throws their ego off balance in a way that gets their attention. When you pull back right, you're still kind, you're still respectful, you're just not available on demand anymore. If they text at 2 a.m. after ignoring you all day, you are not obligated to respond just because your heart jumps. If they suddenly want to see you after weeks of distance, you check in with yourself first. Does this actually work for me? Does this feel good for me? You are no longer operating from fear of losing them, but from awareness of whether this reflects the kind of love you want in your life. And that subtle internal question changes your behavior in ways they can feel. Your vibe shifts from "please don't leave me" to "if this isn't healthy, I'll leave." And that energy is magnetic, because it shows you are not afraid to protect your own heart. This kind of pullback also creates space for you to see clearly when you're not busy chasing, over-explaining, or strategizing your next move. You start to notice things about them you were previously ignoring. You see how often they actually show up. You see whether they reach out when you don't initiate. You see how they respond when you're not bending over backward. Do they become more curious about you, more invested, more present? Or do they simply fade? Because the ego high of being chased is gone. That information is priceless because it shows you whether this person is capable of real love or only addicted to the feeling of being needed. You no longer have to guess. Their actions in this space tell you everything. From their side, the right pullback doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like a loss of control. The usual pattern they relied on is gone. When they distance themselves, the gap doesn't automatically close itself anymore. When they send something shallow, they don't get a tidal wave of depth in return. When they test how little they can give, they are met with the reality that access to you is no longer unlimited and unconditional. And that's where curiosity starts to grow inside them. What changed? Why are they different? Who are they when they're not orbiting around me? That curiosity is far more powerful than fear-based shock tactics, because it does just make them react. It makes them think. It nudges them to either step up and truly engage or step aside and lose you. And either way, you win because you chose to pull back, not to punish them, but to finally stand with yourself. There's a moment in this dance with an avoidant that almost nobody talks about because you don't see it with your eyes. You only feel the strange shift in the air. The panic behind their silence, the storm underneath their calm exterior. On the outside, they look exactly the same, unconcerned, detached, busy with life, replying slowly or not at all, but inside their ego is spiraling, replaying one question again and again. Did I just lose the one person who always understood me? And the wild thing is, they will often feel this panic long before they are willing to admit it to themselves, and certainly long before they will ever admit it to you. Avoidant people have spent years training themselves to appear unaffected, to look composed, to act like nothing really touches them. Their identity is built on being the unbothered one, the one who doesn't need anyone, the one who can walk away and be fine. But that identity is fragile, it's armor, not truth, and when you finally stop chasing, when your energy shifts, that armor starts to crack, and they feel the fracture long before you see any visible change in their behavior. At first, they will try to explain it away in their own mind. They'll tell themselves, you're just busy, you'll come back like you always do, this is just a phase, because their ego desperately wants to hold on to the old script where you are always the one who reaches, always the one who apologizes, always the one who breaks the silence. But as the hours turn into days, and the days start to feel different, the illusion weakens. Maybe you didn't reply to a message they expected you to answer immediately. Maybe you gave a short, neutral response instead of your usual warmth. Maybe you simply stopped sharing every little detail of your life. They notice all of that, even if they pretend not to. They feel the distance like a drop in temperature in a room they were used to being comfortably warm, and their ego hates that shift because it no longer feels in control. This is when their minds start scanning old memories of you, your kindness, your patience, the times you showed up when nobody else did, the times you understood their moods, the times you made them feel seen without demanding they expose their whole heart. And a part of them has always believed that access to that level of understanding is permanent, that you are like emotional Wi-Fi, always on, always there. Even if they wander off for a while, the question, did I just lose that, lands like a punch to the gut. The panic behind their silence doesn't always look dramatic. It often shows up in subtle ways. They stalk your social media, but don't like anything. They open your messages and don't respond because they don't know what to say. That won't expose how shook they are. They bring your name up casually to friends. I haven't talked to them in a bit, trying to sound indifferent, but inwardly listening to their own words, realizing how strange it feels to admit out loud that there is distance now. They replay the last few interactions, looking for the exact moment the energy shifted. They wonder if they pushed too far this time, if that last dismissal, that last ignored message, that last cancelled plan was the breaking point. They won't tell you this, but they feel it, and their ego does. Know whether to double down on pride or reach for you, so it freezes. And that freeze looks like silence. You, on the other side of that silence, might be telling yourself a completely different story. You might think, they don't care at all, they moved on. I meant nothing, because all you can see is the outer behavior, the delayed replies, the distance, a lack of initiative. But very often that silence is not proof of the absence of feeling, it's proof of the presence of ego. Their ego is trying to protect them from the vulnerability of saying, I miss you, I'm scared I lost you, I didn't realize how much you mattered until you stopped trying. So instead of reaching, they retreat into the mask that has always kept them safe, and that mask is calm detachment. But make no mistake, their body betrays what their face hides. Their chest tightens when they see your name. Their stomach drops when they notice you didn't watch their story. Their mind drifts back to you in quiet moments. When distractions fade, their sleep is lighter because unsettled energy doesn't rest easily. This internal battle can go on for a long time. Their ego weighing, if I reach out, I look weak, I look needy, I admit I was wrong, against, if I don't reach out, I could actually lose them. It toggles between pride and fear, between the comfort of staying in character as the detached one and the pain of imagining you truly gone. That is the spiral. That is the looped question. Did I just lose the one person who always understood me? Because deep down, they know they didn't do the work to deserve you. They know they took advantage of your patience. They know they leaned on your love while refusing to fully step into theirs. And if you truly are shifting, if you truly are done applying for the position of the one who always waits, then their silence is not the silence of someone who feels nothing. It's the silence of someone whose ego is cracking and doesn't yet know how to speak from their heart instead. The real shift, the one that quietly makes an avoidant person obsessed, is not when you say the perfect thing to make them jealous or when you break down crying. It's when you become that rare person who deeply understands their fears but refuses to enable their avoidant pattern anymore. Most people in their life do one of two things. They either chase and abandon their own needs to keep the connection alive, or they get fed up, explode, and walk away in anger. Both responses still revolve around the avoidance ego because they stay the center of the story. You are going to do something different. You will understand them without excusing them, love them without losing yourself, see their wounds without volunteering to be the bandage they use and discard whenever they feel overwhelmed. Avoidant people are used to being either demonized or romanticized, painted as heartless or as fragile souls who just need infinite patience. You step out of that drama. You recognize their fear of closeness is real, that somewhere in their past intimacy came with chaos, criticism, control, or abandonment, and their nervous system learned to read love as danger. When things feel too intense, their instinct is to pull back, not necessarily because you did something wrong, but because their body remembers old pain. You understand this, and stop taking every withdrawal as I'm not enough. You stop making their fear your flaw. That alone shifts the power, because your self-esteem is no longer sitting in their hands. Inside you can say, I see why you do this, but I also know who I am, and I will not shrink my needs to fit your fear. When you truly understand their fear, you no longer use shame as a weapon. You're not attacking them with, what's wrong with you? Why can't you just be normal? You're holding a different line. Get that closeness scares you, and your instinct is to run. But here's where my understanding ends and my boundary begins. This is where refusing to enable their patterns starts. You no longer make it easy for them to disappear and reappear as they please. You don't keep the door wide open for someone who keeps walking in and out. You don't reward half effort with full access to your heart. You don't accept that's just how I am as a lifelong excuse to treat you carelessly. Your empathy stays, but your tolerance for dysfunction drops. That combination is rare because most people either empathize so much that they tolerate anything or protect themselves so fiercely they stop empathizing at all. For an avoidant, being met with both understanding and boundaries is deeply disarming. Their usual script is simple. If you push, they run. If you chase, they withdraw. If you shame, they shut down. If you tolerate, they stay the same. Now the script is broken. You're not pushing, you're not chasing, you're not shaming, and you're not tolerating. You are standing calm, clear, grounded. You can say, I know you get overwhelmed, so I'm not going to flood you, but I also need consistency. And if you can't offer that, I will choose a different kind of relationship for myself. That doesn't attack who they are. It simply defines what you will and won't accept. In that moment, their ego realizes, if I want to keep this person, I can't keep hiding behind my fear forever. And that realization is where their quiet obsession begins. You become the emotional standard they measure others against. Because you did what almost no one else did. You saw their patterns and didn't run. But you also didn't bend your entire life around them. You stayed long enough to be real, but strong enough to walk if they refused to grow. Their ego, which used to feel safe and in control around you, now feels off balance. Because it knows your love is no longer guaranteed. Refusing to enable their avoidant patterns also means you stop participating in the cycles that used to exhaust you. When they pull away, you don't chase. When they send low-effort crumbs, you don't respond with a feast. When they reappear after ghosting, you don't act like nothing happened. You let their choices have weight. If they disappear, they return to less access, less intimacy, less of your energy. Not because you're punishing them, but because life moved and you grew. In this space, they are finally forced into a real decision, step up or step out. There is no longer a comfortable middle where they get the benefits of your emotional depth without matching it. Either they begin to do the uncomfortable work of staying present, communicating honestly, and managing their fears without dumping them on you, or they slowly slide to the edges of your life. And that is exactly what hooks their mind on you, not because you trap them with games, but because you are the one person who met their fear with compassion and their patterns with limits, and you never abandoned your own heart to keep them comfortable. There comes a point in this whole story where you finally realize something powerful. Their ego might have started the game, but you are the one who decides how it ends. In the beginning, you didn't even know you were in a game. You were just loving them, giving them the benefit of the doubt, making excuses for their distance, explaining away their hot and cold behavior because you could feel their potential, you could sense the connection. And you believed that if you just held on a little longer, poured in a little more love, proved yourself a little more, they would eventually feel safe enough to choose you fully. Meanwhile, their ego was moving the pieces, testing how far it could push, how little it could give, how much it could take without losing you. The rules were unspoken but very real. You overfunction, they underfunction. You reach, they retreat. You explain, they shrug. And every round like that trained you to believe they had all the power. The ultimate twist of power happens when you finally see that dynamic clearly and decide you're done playing by those rules. Not with an angry speech, not with threats, not with dramatic ultimatums, but with quiet, final choices that prioritize your self-respect above your desperation. You stop measuring your worth by how much attention they give you. You stop making their inconsistency a reflection of your value. You stop trying to earn the love that should have been freely offered. Instead, you start asking a different set of questions. Does this relationship honor me? Do I feel safe, seen and chosen? Does this dynamic grow me or drain me? And when the answer hurts, you don't numb it with fantasy, you listen. That's where the power shifts. When you choose self-respect, you don't stop loving them. You just stop betraying yourself for them. You can still care. You can still remember the good moments. You can still understand their wounds. But you no longer allow their wounds to become the justification for your own emotional starvation. You stop over-displaying your standards and start embodying them. You stop waiting for potential and start responding to patterns. You stop giving infinite chances to someone who keeps proving they're not ready to handle the weight of your heart. And in doing that, you end the game, because a game needs two participants, one to chase and one to run, one to overgive and one to take, one to fix and one to avoid. When you step out of your role, the entire script collapses. From their side, this feels like losing control of a board they thought they were winning on. Their ego is stunned because it was so used to having the upper hand. It believed that no matter how many times it pushed you away, you would circle back. It believed that your fear of losing them would always be bigger than your fear of losing yourself. When that's no longer true, when you are willing to risk losing them rather than continue losing yourself, that's when you become unforgettable, whether they admit it or not. They will think about the moment you stop chasing. They will remember the subtle shift in your energy. They will replay the last conversation where you didn't beg, didn't fight, didn't plead. You just calmly stated your truth and then followed it with action. Their ego feels the sting of that more than any angry outburst you could have delivered. Maybe they try to test you again, sending a casual message to see if the old version of you shows up. Maybe they wait, expecting you to crack and reach out like before. Maybe they distract themselves with other people or new situations, hoping to recreate the feeling of being wanted without having to change. But there will be quiet moments, late at night, in between distractions, when their mind drifts back to you, not to the version of you that begged or chased, but to the version that finally said, I know my worth now, and stuck to it. That version of you is the one they can't stop thinking about, because you did the one thing they never expected you stopped playing. And here's the real power. The outcome doesn't even matter as much anymore. Maybe they do rise to meet you. Maybe they come back with genuine effort, honest communication, and a willingness to work on their patterns. If they do, you'll be able to receive it from a stronger place, because you're no longer coming from need, you're coming from choice. Or maybe they don't rise, maybe they stay in their comfort zone, maybe they fade out for good. It will hurt, of course it will, but it won't destroy you, because you didn't abandon yourself this time. You walked away with your dignity intact, your standards elevated, and your heart still open to a healthier love in the future. The twist is this: they might be the one who triggered your healing journey, but you are the one who benefits from it the most. They may or may not grow. They may or may not wake up in time. They may or may not ever say, I realize what I lost. But you will be different, stronger, wiser, softer with yourself, harder to play with. The game their ego started ends with you choosing you, and that end. The image of you standing tall in your worth is the one thing that ego will never fully escape, because deep down it knows it didn't just lose a person, it lost a version of you that would have given them the world. And you took that world back and built a life they will always remember from the outside.